Welcome back to Bookkast, where we bring you bestsellers in minutes.
Bestsellers in minutes.
Today we're diving into Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money.
Oh, yeah, a great one.
It's a fascinating look at how
Definitely.
our minds can sometimes work against us
Absolutely.
when it comes to finances.
It really challenges those traditional ideas about investing and wealth building and emphasizes the often overlooked human element.
Right. We have some really insightful excerpts from the book,
Yeah.
and I'm eager to unpack those golden nuggets with you.
Let's get into it.
What I found interesting is how Housel emphasizes
Yeah.
that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to personal finance.
Uh-huh.
Everyone has their own unique financial psychology.
Absolutely. He starts with this concept, no one's crazy, which argues that everyone's financial decisions are shaped by their own experiences.
Oh, interesting.
Someone who grew up during a recession might be super cautious with investments,
Right.
while someone who inherited wealth might have a completely different perspective.
Like that story Housel shares about the tech executive who threw gold coins into the ocean.
Oh, yeah, that's a wild one.
As a valet, he saw this firsthand.
Right.
And it really highlights how diverse and sometimes baffling financial behaviors can be.
It's a great illustration. It underscores how we often judge others' financial choices without understanding the underlying reasons or experiences that shape their perspectives.
So true. It's like looking at a map without knowing the terrain.
Exactly.
Recognizing that no one's crazy is key to having more empathy and understanding in financial conversations.
Definitely. It encourages us to pause and reflect on our own biases and how they influence our decisions. It's about understanding our own financial psychology before judging someone else's.
Speaking of understanding influences, Housel dives into the roles of luck and risk in financial success.
Uh-huh.
He uses the contrasting examples of Bill Gates and Cornelius Vanderbilt.
Interesting pair.
What struck me is how Gates' path to success involved a series of incredibly lucky events, like attending one of the only high schools with a computer at that time.
It's a powerful point. It makes you realize how much of success, even for someone as brilliant as Bill Gates, can be attributed to being in the right place at the right time. It challenges the notion that hard work alone guarantees success.
It definitely makes you think about those sliding door moments in life.
For sure.
On the other hand, you have Vanderbilt, who was a ruthless risk-taker,
Yeah.
flouting laws to build his railroad empire.
He was a different breed.
It paid off for him, but Housel cautions us against romanticizing that kind of recklessness.
I see it as a balancing act. Acknowledging luck and risk reminds us that success isn't always a linear path.
Right.
It's about understanding those external factors while still focusing on what we can control, like our effort and decision-making process.
This leads us to a concept that really resonated with me.
Okay?
Never enough. Housel shares the cautionary tales of Rajat Gupta and Bernie Madoff.
Interesting.
Both were incredibly successful, but driven by this insatiable desire for more, which ultimately led to their downfall.
What's fascinating is that both men already had immense wealth, far beyond what most people could ever dream of.
Yeah.
It shows how that comparison game, that constant striving for more, can lead us down a dangerous path.
It's like being on a treadmill that never stops. I wonder if it's even possible to achieve true contentment when we're constantly comparing ourselves to others.
That's a great question. Housel suggests shifting our focus from more to enough.
I like that.
It's about recognizing that true wealth isn't about having the most, but having enough to live a fulfilling life.
So it's about defining what enough means for you, right?
Exactly. It requires introspection and aligning your financial goals with your values and aspirations, rather than societal expectations.
Now let's talk about confounding compounding. This chapter totally blew my mind.
Oh, yeah.
Housel breaks down how consistent, small actions over time can lead to incredible results.
It's pretty amazing when you think about it.
He uses that powerful analogy of an ice age forming from a tiny shift in the Earth's orbit.
It's a perfect illustration how seemingly insignificant actions, when compounded over time, can create massive change.
Wow.
It highlights the importance of patience and consistency in building wealth.
And it's not just about investing, right? It applies to other areas of life too, like learning a new skill or building a business.
Absolutely. It shifts the focus from grand gestures to those small, daily actions that ultimately shape our long-term outcomes.
It's inspiring, actually. Even if you can't make huge leaps right now, those small steps can add up to something significant. Like Housel mentions about Warren Buffett, most of his wealth was accumulated after he turned 50.
It really challenges the notion that you need to make a killing early on to be financially successful.
Right.
Time is your greatest ally when it comes to compounding, so even starting small can lead to remarkable results.
This brings up another important point Housel makes
Okay.
about getting wealthy versus staying wealthy.
Ah, yes.
He argues they require completely different mindsets and skills.
He uses the contrasting examples of Jackie Livermore, who made and lost fortunes multiple times, and Ronald Read, a janitor who died with an $8 million portfolio. It illustrates the difference between taking big risks and playing the long game.
Livermore was brilliant at making money quickly, but terrible at keeping it.
Oh, wow.
He was constantly chasing the next big win, which eventually led to his downfall. Reed, on the other hand, lived modestly, saved consistently, and let compounding work its magic over decades.
It's a crucial lesson. Maintaining wealth requires discipline, patience, and a focus on preservation. It's about making decisions that ensure long-term sustainability rather than chasing those short-term gains that can quickly vanish.
So it's about shifting from a mindset of speculation to one of stewardship, right?
Exactly. It's about building a solid foundation that can weather those inevitable market fluctuations and economic storms.
This has been a fascinating discussion so far. We've covered so much ground, from understanding our own financial psychology to the roles of luck and risk to the power of compounding.
And we're just getting started. There are many more thought-provoking insights to explore in the psychology of money. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll delve into even more fascinating concepts from Morgan Housel.
Welcome back to Bookkast.
Part 2.
We're continuing our exploration of the psychology of money.
Yeah.
One concept that stood out to me is what Housel calls tails you win. It's this idea that a small percentage of investments or decisions often drive the majority of the results.
It's a powerful concept, especially when it comes to investing and understanding how venture capital works. Housel illustrates it with the example of Heinz Bergermann, an art dealer who fled Nazi Germany and built an incredible fortune in America.
So how did this tails you win principle play out in his life?
Well, Bergermann became one of the most successful art collectors of all time.
Really?
But not because he consistently picked winners. Most of the artwork she acquired was probably average in terms of value.
Oh, okay.
However, a small fraction of his collection turned out to be masterpieces by iconic artists like Picasso and Matisse.
So it's like a few big wins outweighed a lot of smaller losses.
Yeah.
That makes me think about venture capitalists who invest in tons of startups, knowing that most will fail.
Exactly.
But they're betting on that one unicorn that skyrockets in value.
Exactly. Those few massive wins make up for all the times they miss the mark.
Wow.
This principle is crucial for understanding how success often works.
Yeah.
It's not always about being right all the time, but about having the resilience to stay in the game long enough for those tails to emerge.
Housel talks about how this principle isn't just limited to investing, right?
Right.
He applies it to business, too.
Yes. He uses the example of the Russell 3000 stock market index.
Okay.
A significant percentage of companies in that index have actually lost most of their value over time.
Oh, wow.
However, the index as a whole has still delivered incredible returns because a handful of companies, those tails, have driven the vast majority of the growth.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
It seems this tails you win concept is a reminder to have a long-term perspective and to not be discouraged by setbacks.
Absolutely. It highlights the importance of patience, persistence, and understanding that success is often driven by a few key decisions or events. Sometimes it's about writing out the volatility and staying focused on the bigger picture.
This ties in beautifully with another key theme in the book.
Okay.
Freedom. Housel argues that the greatest dividend money pays is freedom. The freedom to do what you want, when you want, with who you want, for as long as you want.
It's about having options, flexibility, and control over your time.
Right.
He emphasizes that it's not always about extravagant wealth, but about having enough to live a life that aligns with your values and priorities.
He shares a personal story about working a high-paying job that made him miserable.
Yeah.
It really resonated with me because sometimes that golden handcuff feeling can be the worst. You're trading your time and happiness for a paycheck.
He uses that experience to highlight that money is just a tool. It should serve us, not the other way around. It's about finding that balance between financial security and pursuing what truly matters to you.
So how can we, as individuals, define what freedom means for us?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think it starts with introspection.
Okay.
What are your values?
Right.
What brings you joy?
Yeah.
How do you envision spending your time?
Okay.
Answering these questions can help you determine how much money you truly need to achieve that sense of freedom.
That's a really helpful perspective. I think a lot of people might be surprised to realize that freedom doesn't always require massive wealth.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's about aligning your financial goals with your definition of a fulfilling life.
Housel also challenges the common misconception that wealth is all about flashy cars and expensive homes.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
He calls it wealth is what you don't see. It's about having those hidden savings,
Yes.
investments, and assets that provide you with options and security.
I love that concept. It flips the script on those traditional markers of wealth.
I know, right?
It's not about impressing others with material possessions, but about building a solid financial foundation that gives you peace of mind and the ability to make choices without being constrained by financial limitations.
So it's less about keeping up with the Joneses and more about building a financial fortress that can withstand whatever life throws your way.
Exactly. It's about those unseen assets that allow you to sleep soundly at night, knowing that you have a cushion for unexpected events and the freedom to pursue your dreams.
This brings us to a concept that might seem obvious,
Okay?
but is often overlooked.
Yeah.
Save money. Housel brings a fresh perspective to this age-old advice.
He uses a compelling analogy to the oil crisis in the 1970s.
Interesting.
Instead of panicking and trying to find more oil,
Right.
we focused on using the oil we had more efficiently. We started making cars that got better gas mileage and invested in energy-saving technologies.
So he's suggesting we apply this same principle to our finances. Instead of constantly chasing higher investment returns,
Yes.
we should focus on managing our spending and saving more.
Precisely. It's about being mindful of our consumption habits and recognizing that saving isn't about deprivation,
Right.
but about aligning our spending with our values and long-term goals.
Okay.
The less we spend, the less we need, and the more freedom we have.
It's a really powerful way to reframe the concept of saving. It's not about sacrificing our current lifestyle,
Right.
but about making conscious choices that empower us in the long run.
Absolutely. It's about finding that sweet spot between enjoying the present and planning for the future.
I love how Housel challenges the idea of always striving for perfectly rational financial decisions.
It's so true.
He suggests that sometimes it's better to be reasonable rational. He even uses the example of Harry Markowitz,
Oh, yeah.
the Nobel Prize-winning economist,
Right, right.
who admitted to not following his own complex investment theory in his personal life.
It's a great example of how sometimes those perfectly rational strategies,
Right.
while great in theory, can be too complex or stressful to implement in the real world.
So it's about finding a balance between making informed decisions and not getting bogged down by analysis paralysis.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're human beings with emotions and biases that can influence our decisions. Sometimes the most important thing is to create a financial plan
Right.
that you can actually stick with, even if it's not perfectly optimized according to some theoretical model.
It's about creating a plan that aligns with your risk tolerance, your lifestyle, and your overall well-being. It's about finding what works for you, not what some expert dictates.
I couldn't agree more. It's about recognizing that personal finance is truly personal.
Housel throws us for a loop in the next chapter. Surprise!
Okay.
He reminds us that history doesn't always repeat itself and that unexpected events
Right.
can reshape the financial landscape in an instant. He uses the analogy of an alien revisiting Earth after the 2008 financial crisis.
That's such a creative way to illustrate his point.
Yeah.
The alien sees that our cities and factories are still standing, but wonders why everyone is so panicked.
Oh, interesting.
It highlights how economic narratives and psychological factors can have a huge impact on our behavior, even if the underlying fundamentals haven't drastically changed.
It reminds me of how rapidly things can change. Just a decade ago, hardly anyone was talking about cryptocurrencies. Now, they're everywhere.
Exactly. It underscores the importance of being adaptable and recognizing that unexpected events can and will happen.
Right.
We need to be humble when making predictions about the future and be prepared to adjust our plans as needed.
This leads to his advice on building in a room for error. It's about having a margin of safety in our financial lives to absorb those unexpected challenges.
Right.
He uses this fantastic story
Yeah.
about German tanks in World War II being disabled by mice.
I love that story. It's a perfect illustration of how even the most sophisticated plans
Right.
can be disrupted by unforeseen events.
Wow.
Housel argues that we need to build in buffers like emergency funds and diversified investments
Right.
to protect ourselves from those black swan events.
So it's about accepting that we can't control everything and that unexpected events can happen. It's about having that cushion to weather the storm without derailing our financial progress.
He suggests having a barbell approach to investing,
Okay.
with a portion dedicated to high-risk, high-reward opportunities and another portion focused on conservative investments like cash or bonds.
Oh, okay.
It allows you to participate in potential upside while also mitigating those unforeseen risks.
I like that approach. It seems like a balanced way to navigate uncertainty. It allows you to embrace calculated risks while also prioritizing financial stability.
Another crucial reminder from Housel is that as we go through life,
Okay.
our goals, desires, and priorities will change. What seemed important at age 20
Right.
might seem trivial at age 40.
It's true. We're constantly evolving and growing.
Yeah.
And our financial plans need to be flexible enough to accommodate those changes. I know my financial goals today look very different than they did a decade ago.
He talks about this phenomenon called the end of history illusion, where we tend to underestimate how much will change in the future.
Ooh.
This can lead us to make rigid financial decisions that don't allow for growth and adaptation.
So how can we avoid falling into that trap?
It's about recognizing that our future selves
Right.
might have different needs and aspirations
Right.
when making those big long-term financial decisions like buying a house or
Yep.
choosing a career path.
Yeah.
It's important to build in flexibility and avoid getting locked into a rigid plan
Right.
that doesn't allow for adjustments as your life evolves.
It seems like embracing change is a key theme throughout the book.
Absolutely.
It's about being adaptable and willing to adjust our course as our circumstances and priorities shift.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing that personal finance isn't a static set of rules,
Yeah.
but a dynamic process that should evolve with you.
And of course, we can't forget that there's no such thing as a free lunch.
Right.
Housel reminds us in the chapter, nothing's free,
Yeah.
that every investment comes with a price,
Right.
often in the form of volatility or uncertainty.
He uses the example of Netflix stock.
Okay.
It's delivered incredible returns over the years,
Yeah.
but it's also been incredibly volatile. For the majority of its history, it's traded below its all-time high.
So even though Netflix was a long-term success story,
Yeah.
if you had bought it at the wrong time,
Right.
you could have been underwater for years.
Exactly. It highlights the inherent trade-off
Right.
between risk and reward. Housel argues that we need to accept volatility as
Yeah.
part of the game, especially if we're seeking those outsized gains.
Right.
If we view volatility as a punishment, we'll never be able to stomach
Yeah.
the ups and downs of investing in those high-growth assets.
It's about reframing our perspective and seeing volatility as the price we pay for the potential of those life-changing returns. It's like paying a fee to access those opportunities.
I think that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
It takes the emotion out of those short-term fluctuations and helps us stay focused on the long-term game.
Housel emphasizes that the best financial advice is personalized, based on individual goals and values. In the chapter, You and Me,
Okay.
he draws a parallel to the evolution of medical practices, from doctors dictating treatments to a model of shared decision-making
Yeah.
between doctor and patient.
It's about respecting individual preferences and recognizing that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to finances. What works for one person might not work for another.
So it's about finding a financial advisor who listens to your concerns, understands your goals,
Yes.
and helps you create a plan that feels right for you, even if it deviates from conventional wisdom.
Absolutely. It's about empowering individuals to take ownership of their financial decisions and to seek advice that aligns with their unique circumstances and values.
This makes me think about how much financial advice is often presented as absolute truth, when in reality,
Yeah.
there are many different paths to achieving financial well-being.
You're right. There are many different approaches, and
Yeah.
it's important to find what resonates with you and your individual circumstances.
Now, in a world saturated with information, it's easy to get caught up in the negativity bias.
Yeah.
Housel discusses this in the chapter Seduction of Pessimism.
Uh-huh.
He points out how captivating negativity can be,
Right.
especially when it comes to the economy.
The media loves to highlight those pessimistic forecasts.
Oh, yeah.
Even though historically the economy tends to grow over the long run, there's a certain allure to negativity,
Right.
and it tends to grab our attention more than stories of hope and progress.
That's so true. We often seem drawn to the worst-case scenarios. It's like we're wired to focus on potential threats.
Housel isn't suggesting that we should ignore risks
Right.
or pretend everything is perfect. It's about being aware of that negativity bias
Uh-huh.
and striving for a more balanced perspective that acknowledges both the challenges and the opportunities.
It's about recognizing that throughout history, we've faced countless crises and setbacks,
Yeah.
yet we've always found a way to overcome them. Human ingenuity and resilience have a remarkable track record.
I love that. It's a reminder that we have the capacity to innovate and adapt.
Right.
It's about approaching our finances with a healthy dose of caution,
Yeah.
but also with a belief in our ability to navigate challenges and create a better future.
Housel takes us a step further in the chapter When You'll Believe Anything.
Okay.
He argues that when the stakes are high and we feel like we lack control,
Mm-hmm.
we're more likely to believe in appealing fictions, especially when it comes to money.
He shares this heartbreaking story about a father in Yemen who
Oh,
resorted to a dangerous folk remedy
wow.
to cure his sick son because village elders convinced him it would work.
Oh, no.
It highlights how desperation can drive people to believe in things that logically they know are probably not true.
It's a powerful example of how our emotions can cloud our judgment, especially when we're dealing with something as important as our finances.
And this often manifests in the financial world,
Right.
as falling for get-rich-quick schemes or believing in unrealistic promises of high returns with no risk. We become so fixated on those potential rewards that we ignore the red flags and warning signs.
It's like that old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is.
Exactly. When making those big financial decisions, it's crucial to be critical of advice that promises unrealistic outcomes or plays on your fears and anxieties.
It's about doing your research, seeking multiple perspectives, and trusting your intuition when something feels off.
Now let's shift our focus to how cultural and societal trends impact our financial behaviors.
Okay.
Housel explores this in the chapter All Together Now.
He argues that our financial decisions aren't just shaped by our individual experiences,
Right.
but also by the larger cultural and economic forces at play. This makes a lot of sense because we're all influenced by the norms and expectations of our society.
He traces the evolution of spending, debt, and economic inequality in America,
Right.
starting with the post-World War II economic boom.
Okay.
There was a surge in consumer spending fueled by low interest rates and easy credit. It was the era of the American dream.
Right.
Buying a house, a car, all those things that symbolized success.
And debt was seen as a tool for achieving that dream.
Yes, back then it was largely manageable because
Uh-huh.
incomes were rising
Right.
and most people were participating in the economic prosperity. But as the decades passed, economic growth became more uneven.
Okay.
The gap between the rich and poor widened, and that sense of shared prosperity began to erode.
But our cultural expectations and aspirations for a certain lifestyle didn't change as quickly.
Right. People continued to strive for those markers of success,
Right.
even if their incomes weren't keeping pace.
It's like that pressure to keep up with the Joneses never went away, even though the economic landscape shifted.
Exactly. This has been further fueled by advertising, media, and now social media,
Right.
constantly bombarding us with images of a certain lifestyle that
Yeah.
might not be attainable or even desirable for many people.
It's created this situation where many people are stretching themselves thin financially,
Yeah,
feeling pressured to maintain a certain image,
right.
even if it's not aligned with their values or financial reality.
It's crucial to be aware of these societal forces and to make conscious decisions that align with your personal values and financial goals rather than getting swept up in trends that might not serve you.
I think it's so important to have these conversations
I agree.
because they help us recognize those external influences and to make more informed choices that are aligned with our authentic selves.
I agree. It's about being mindful of those subtle pressures
Yeah.
can impact our financial decisions
Right.
and to find what truly resonates with us.
Now, in a chapter aptly titled Confessions,
Yeah,
Housel gets personal,
right.
sharing some of his own financial choices
Uh-huh.
that might not align with conventional wisdom, but
Yeah.
that work for him and his family.
I found this chapter to be quite refreshing
Yeah.
because it challenges the idea that there's only one right way to manage your finances.
He talks about how he prefers to own his house outright,
Okay.
even though it might not be the most financially optimal strategy. He also keeps a higher percentage of his assets in cash
Yeah.
than most advisors would recommend.
He's making the point that personal finance is truly personal.
Yeah.
It's about finding what brings you peace of mind
Right.
and aligning your financial decisions with your individual values and risk tolerance.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the best financial decisions are the ones that feel right for you, even if they don't follow those rigid rules and formulas.
It's about finding that balance between making informed choices and prioritizing your own well-being and happiness.
This has been a phenomenal discussion. We've covered so much ground in part 2, exploring everything from the concept of tails you win, to the importance of freedom and saving, to the influence of cultural trends on our financial behaviors.
And there's still more to come.
Oh, great.
In part 3, we'll wrap things up with some key takeaways and actionable insights from the psychology of money.
Welcome back to Bookkast for the final part of our deep dive into the psychology of money.
Lots to unpack.
We've covered so much ground, from those hidden biases that shape our financial decisions
Yeah,
to those surprising factors like luck and risk that often play a role in success.
for sure.
Now I'm really excited to distill some of the key takeaways
Okay.
from this book into actionable insights that we can apply to our own financial lives.
Let's do it. I think one of the most impactful takeaways is this idea that wealth isn't about showing off, but about having options and flexibility. It's what Housel calls wealth is what you don't see, those savings, investments, and assets
Right.
that provide you with a sense of freedom and security.
That really shifted my perspective because it's so easy to get caught up in comparing ourselves to others
Oh, yeah.
and thinking that wealth is all about those flashy external markers.
It's a trap many of us fall into. We see those curated social media posts and think that's the definition of success.
Right.
And remember, you're only seeing a tiny snapshot of someone's financial picture. It's far more empowering to focus on building your own financial fortress
Right.
and aligning your financial goals with your values, not on keeping up with those external expectations.
So it's about defining what truly matters to you and building a financial life that supports that vision. And that brings us to another key takeaway that might seem obvious,
Okay.
but is often overlooked. Save money.
Housel approaches this age-old advice with a fresh perspective.
Yeah.
He emphasizes that saving isn't about deprivation, but about being intentional with your spending
Right.
and aligning it with your values. The less you spend, the less you need,
Right.
and the less reliant you are on external factors to maintain your lifestyle. It's about creating a sense of self-sufficiency and freedom.
I love how he uses that analogy of the oil crisis in the 1970s to illustrate this point.
Oh, yeah, good one.
Instead of frantically searching for more oil, we became more efficient with the oil we already had.
Right.
We started making cars that got better gas mileage and developed energy-saving technologies.
It's a brilliant analogy because it shows that we often have more control than we realize. Instead of constantly seeking higher returns, which can be unpredictable and stressful, we can focus on what we can control our spending and saving habits. It's about optimizing the resources we already have.
It's a powerful shift in mindset. And don't forget the magic of compounding, which Housel so eloquently explains. Even small, consistent contributions to your savings can snowball over time,
Absolutely.
especially when you start early
Yes.
and let time work its magic.
Absolutely. Remember the example of Warren Buffett?
Yeah.
Most of his wealth was accumulated after he turned 50. It's a testament to the power of patience and consistency when it comes to building wealth.
Wow.
It's not about timing the market or making risky bets, but about steadily growing your assets over time.
It's a long game, isn't it?
It is.
This brings us to another crucial takeaway. Embracing the long game.
Yes.
Building wealth is a marathon, not a sprint.
It requires a shift in mindset from instant gratification to delayed gratification, from seeking quick wins to focusing on sustainable growth.
Right.
It's about making those smart, consistent choices over time,
Yeah.
not chasing get-rich-quick schemes or trying to time the market. It's about building a solid foundation for lasting wealth
Right.
that can withstand those inevitable market fluctuations and economic storms.
And it's also about accepting that volatility is part of the journey, especially if you're seeking those potentially outsized returns.
Exactly.
It's the price you pay for the possibility of those life-changing gains.
Exactly. It's like a fee you pay to access those opportunities. If you view volatility as a punishment or a sign of failure, you'll likely make emotional decisions that could derail your long-term plan.
Right.
Instead, reframe your perspective and see volatility as an inherent part of the process.
Housel also wisely reminds us that you'll change. As we navigate life, our goals, desires, and risk tolerance will evolve.
For sure.
What seemed important at one stage might seem trivial later on.
So true. It's essential to build in some flexibility into your financial plan. Don't lock yourself into a rigid strategy that doesn't allow for adjustments as your life unfolds. You want a plan that can adapt to those inevitable shifts in your circumstances and priorities.
I think it's easy to fall into that trap of thinking our current goals and priorities will remain constant.
Yeah.
It's almost like we imagine our future selves as a static version of who we are today,
Right.
but we're constantly growing and evolving.
He talks about that end of history illusion,
Yeah.
where we underestimate how much will change in the future. It can lead us to make choices that our future selves might regret. So build in that adaptability
Okay.
and recognize that personal finance isn't about following a set of rigid rules, but about creating a dynamic plan that evolves with you.
Another key takeaway that resonated with me
Okay.
is this idea that sometimes it's better to be reasonable rational.
Hmm.
It's about finding that balance between making informed decisions and not getting bogged down by analysis paralysis.
It's about recognizing that we're humans with emotions and biases that can influence our decisions. Sometimes the most important thing is to create a financial plan that you can actually stick with, even if it's not perfectly optimized according to some theoretical model.
He uses the example of Harry Markowitz, a brilliant economist who won a Nobel Prize for developing a groundbreaking investment theory. But guess what?
What's that?
Even Markowitz admitted that he didn't follow his own complex theory when it came to his personal finances.
Really?
It was too stressful and complicated to implement in the real world.
It's a fantastic illustration of how sometimes those perfectly rational strategies, while great in theory,
Right.
can be overwhelming or impractical in our everyday lives.
It's about finding a plan that aligns with your risk tolerance, your lifestyle, and your overall well-being. It's about finding what works for you, not what some expert dictates.
I love that. Personal finance is truly personal. It's about creating a financial life that supports your overall well-being and allows you to live a life that aligns with your values.
And this brings us to a really important point that Housel emphasizes.
Okay.
The best financial advice is personalized.
Uh-huh.
It should be tailored to your individual goals and values.
Right.
In the chapter You and Me, he draws a parallel to the shift in medical practices from doctors dictating treatments
Right.
to a model of shared decision-making between doctor and patient.
It's about respecting individual preferences and acknowledging that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to finances. What works for one person might not work for another. It's about finding a financial advisor who listens to your concerns, understands your goals, and helps you create a plan that feels right for you, even if it deviates from conventional wisdom.
This resonated with me because there's so much financial advice out there that's presented as absolute truth.
Yeah.
But in reality, there are many different paths to financial well-being. It's about finding what resonates with you and your individual circumstances.
It's about empowering yourself to make informed choices that align with your values and your vision for your life.
We've covered so much ground in this deep dive into the psychology of money. We've explored the intricacies of our financial psychology, the unexpected forces that can shape our outcomes, and the power of long-term thinking and intentional decision-making.
And I've only scratched the surface of what Housel has to offer in this insightful book. It's a must-read for anyone who wants to understand the often overlooked human side of finance and develop a healthier relationship with money.
I completely agree. It's a book that challenges conventional thinking and encourages us to approach our finances with a new perspective, one that prioritizes our overall well-being and empowers us to make choices that align with our values and aspirations.
It's been a pleasure diving into these concepts with you. I hope our listeners feel empowered to examine their own financial psychology and make those small shifts in mindset and habits that can lead to big, positive changes in their financial lives.
I second that. This has been such an insightful and thought-provoking journey. And remember, on Podcast, you get bestsellers in minutes. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep exploring those fascinating ideas that shape our world.